Have you ever wondered what happens when two of basketball's greatest legends meet in an intimate moment? What no one expected was that a simple security camera would capture the most touching moment in American sports history. At that exact moment, on a cold December night in Chicago, something extraordinary was about to happen. You could sense that the air carried a different energy, almost electric, mixed with the sweet aroma of hot chocolate that echoed through the corridors of the Convention Center. The 12th annual edition of Hoops for Hope, a charity event that brought together basketball stars to raise funds for underprivileged children, was coming to an end. Robert Kim, the event's main organizer, walked through the backstage area with hurried steps. Great things happen when nobody is watching, and he had no idea he was about to witness one of the greatest of those things. The event had exceeded all expectations. More than $5 million raised, the presence of 20 former NBA players, and an audience of 3,000 people that packed the main auditorium. How is it possible that two people who apparently live in such different worlds can share the same deep pain? Michael Jordan, at 60 years old, was there as the keynote speaker. His presence always brought a unique mixture of reverence and nervousness, as if the very atmosphere changed when he entered an environment. Steph Curry, in turn, participated as the event's official ambassador, his youthful energy contrasting with Jordan's magnetic intensity. Throughout the entire evening, it was impossible not to feel the subtle tension that hung in the air whenever the two were in the same environment. It wasn't rivalry, it was something much deeper, something that touched deeply the fibers of the human soul. Both had given separate interviews, participated in different roundtables, as if there were a careful dance to avoid a direct encounter. Sarah Mitchell, a veteran ESPN journalist covering the event, had noticed this peculiar dynamic. What impresses most is how great personalities can carry vulnerabilities we never imagine. She had tried several times to create opportunities for a conversation between the two, but something always interrupted. An urgent call, an unexpected commitment, as if the universe were waiting for the perfect moment. How many times in life do we witness the exact instant when two souls recognize each other? The official event had ended 20 minutes ago. Most of the guests had already left, leaving behind only the echo of animated conversations and the persistent smell of espresso that permeated the air. Tyler Brooks, production assistant, was supervising the dismantling when he noticed that the security cameras were still recording. At that moment, Michael Jordan emerged from one of the side dressing rooms. His posture carried something different. It wasn't the fierce confidence of the old Bulls days, nor the business authority everyone knew. It was an almost palpable vulnerability, as if the weight of decades of expectations was finally taking its toll. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his navy blue tie. From the other side of the corridor, Steph Curry had also emerged from his dressing room. Something that touches deeply is the way certain people manage to radiate calm even in moments of pressure. Curry always had this ability, transforming tension into tranquility, like running water smoothing rough stones over time. But at that moment, even his characteristic serenity seemed shaken. The corridor that separated them measured perhaps 15 meters. The soft lighting created elongated shadows on the walls, and the silence was deafening. One of those silences that weigh like 1,000 unspoken words. You could smell the leather from nearby sofas, mixed with the discreet lavender perfume that someone had used hours before. Naturally, this leads us to a moment that would change both, forever. Jordan stopped. Curry also stopped. For some interminable seconds, they simply looked at each other across that distance that seemed to represent much more than physical meters. It represented different generations, different eras of basketball, different philosophies of leadership. Great things happen when nobody is watching. And that's exactly what happened when Jordan took the first step toward Curry. What would you do if you knew your words could heal wounds from decades? What no one could imagine was that Jordan's first step carried the weight of years of unverbalized regrets, of relationships he wished he had nurtured differently, of words he wished he had said when there was still time. Curry, in turn, remained still, but his labored breathing revealed that something deep was being mobilized within him. Like two mountains that finally meet after millennia of continental drift, that moment had an inevitability that transcended any human planning. But then, something happened that nobody expected. Tyler Brooks, checking the security monitors, realized that Camera 7, strategically positioned in the central corridor, had captured everything in high definition. The audio was crystal clear, and what was about to be revealed would change not only the world's perception of Michael Jordan, but would also touch the heart of anyone who had ever struggled to be a better father. But what happened next would change everything forever. At that moment, as Jordan walked slowly toward Curry, each step echoed like heartbeats of a heart that had kept secrets for decades. Have you ever wondered what kind of pain a man carries when the entire world expects him to be invincible? The sound of his leather shoes against the cold floor created a hypnotic rhythm that seemed to tell a story his words had never managed to express. James Wilson, former Bulls assistant coach who now worked as a consultant, was organizing equipment in an adjacent room when he heard the OE footsteps. Something that touches deeply is how certain people manage to carry the weight of the world on their shoulders and still keep walking. Wilson knew that sound. He had heard Jordan walk like that through the United Center corridors on the most difficult nights of the '98 season. To understand what was happening in that corridor, we need to go back 3 decades. Michael Jordan wasn't just an athlete. He was a man who had transformed his pain into fuel, his anger into excellence, his vulnerability into apparently impenetrable armor. But how is it possible for someone to maintain that armor for so long without it beginning to weigh more than it protects? The truth was that Jordan had spent recent years fighting against a ghost that few knew: regret. Not professional regret. His 6 NBA titles spoke for themselves. It was a much deeper and more painful regret, the regret of a father who had chosen perfection in basketball over closeness with his children. Amanda Foster, a sports psychologist who had worked discreetly with various elite athletes, including some of Jordan's former teammates, once described this dilemma as the curse of giants. It's impossible not to feel the weight of this reality. The bigger you become in the world's eyes, the smaller you can feel in the eyes of those who matter most. Steph Curry, on the other hand, represented something Jordan had never managed to be. While Jordan built his legacy through intimidation and competitive isolation, Curry had found a way to be exceptional while staying connected. His famous family celebrations after important victories weren't just cute gestures for the cameras. They were reflections of a life philosophy that placed relationships above records. What impresses most is how Jordan had observed this from a distance for years. How many times in life do you admire in someone exactly what you would have liked to cultivate in yourself? During the 2016 playoffs, when Curry brought his daughter Riley to post-game interviews, Jordan watched the footage at his Charlotte home with a tightness in his chest he couldn't explain. Alex Chen, producer of a documentary about fatherhood in sports that was never completed, had interviewed Jordan 2 years earlier. During a break in filming, Jordan had murmured something Chen never forgot. There's a difference between being respected and being loved. I spent so much time ensuring the first that I forgot how to earn the second. In that corridor, as the distance between the two decreased meter by meter, Jordan carried the weight of unlived memories. His children's school games he missed for being in training. Bedtime conversations that never happened because he was studying videos of opponents. Hugs that were replaced by formal handshakes when his children became adults. Naturally, this leads us to the moment when Jordan stopped just 3 meters from Curry. The air between them seemed thick, charged with a tension that wasn't hostile. It was vulnerable. You could smell the soft scent of Curry's cologne mixed with the woody fragrance of Jordan's aftershave, creating an atmosphere that made that moment almost sacred. Steph. Jordan's voice sounded different. It wasn't the voice of the fierce competitor who intimidated opponents. It wasn't the voice of the successful businessman who commanded meetings. It was the voice of a man who was about to lower his guard for the first time in decades. Curry felt a chill down his spine, not from fear, but from recognition, as if two souls were finally ready to meet without masks. "Michael," Curry responded with his characteristically calm voice, but there was something different there too. A reverence that transcended basketball, an understanding that he was before someone who had paid prices he himself had managed to avoid. Great things happen when nobody is watching, and at that moment, away from spotlights and public expectations, two life philosophies were about to meet. Jordan had built his greatness through isolation, Curry through connection. Jordan had chosen to be a solitary legend. Curry had proven it was possible to be exceptional and still remain human. What would you do if you had the chance to speak with someone who had managed to be everything you would have liked to have been? Jordan swallowed hard. His throat was dry, as if he had just left the court after a 7-period game. The words he had mentally rehearsed for years seemed inadequate for that moment. Jordan began, but stopped. Curry remained silent, his eyes transmitting a patience that invited honesty. It was impossible not to perceive that something monumental was about to happen. Something that would change not only those two men, but anyone who witnessed that raw and real humanity. Then Jordan took another step. Now they were so close they could feel each other's breath. Tyler Brooks, still monitoring the security cameras, held his breath, without even realizing it. His accelerated heartbeat echoed in his ears like distant drums announcing something epic. "Can I tell you something?" Jordan whispered, his voice carrying decades of emotional weight. "Great things happen when nobody is watching, and the greatest of all was about to happen." Nobody could imagine that moment would be the turning point. The silence that followed was so profound that Tyler Brooks, monitoring the cameras, could hear his own heart beating through the headphones. Have you ever wondered what sound a soul makes when it finally decides to open up? At that instant, when Jordan whispered, "Can I tell you something?" it was as if the entire universe had paused to witness something that would change two lives forever. Curry nodded slightly, his eyes transmitting a security that invited vulnerability. How is it possible that some people have this natural capacity to create safe spaces for others to open up? It was impossible not to feel that corridor had transformed into a confessional where masks could finally fall. Jordan breathed deeply. The air now carried a different scent, no longer the hot chocolate from the reception or the leather from the sofas. It was the aroma of courage mixed with decades of regret, like dried rose petals kept in an old book. His hands, which had already held 6 NBA trophies, trembled like leaves in the wind. Steph, Jordan began, his voice so low it seemed like a confession whisper. I spent years watching you, not just as a player, but as— He paused, swallowing words he had never managed to say aloud. As a father. Michael Rodriguez, event security who had worked dozens of similar occasions, was checking the exits when he noticed the conversation from a distance. Something that touches deeply is when you witness the exact moment someone chooses to be brave. He stopped where he was, instinctively understanding he was witnessing something sacred. You know, Jordan continued, his voice gaining strength like a current that finally finds its way. I always thought being a great father meant being like I was on the court, demanding, relentless, always pushing for perfection. His words came loaded with pain that had been refined by years of silent reflection. Curry remained silent, but his labored breathing revealed that each word was resonating in deep places of his soul. What impresses most is how some conversations manage to touch wounds we didn't even know existed. Even being known. For his family closeness, Curry understood the universal struggle of balancing greatness and fatherhood. I lost so many moments, Jordan continued, his voice now carrying the weight of unlived memories. School games, bedtime conversations, those small rituals that build a relationship. You could hear decades of regret echoing in each syllable, like echoes in an empty cathedral. Naturally, this leads us to the moment that would change everything. Jordan took another step, now so close that his words reached Curry like a warm breeze on a cold night. When I see you with your family, Steph, when I see you celebrating with your children, bringing them to interviews, being vulnerable in public. His voice broke slightly. Lisa Rodriguez, event doctor who was finalizing her reports, noticed the conversation and instinctively slowed her pace. How many times in life do we witness the moment when someone finally finds courage to tell the truth they've kept for decades? She had seen many medical confessions, but something in that conversation touched a universality that transcended any professional specialty. You taught me something I never managed to learn alone, Jordan whispered, and now his words came loaded with gratitude that seemed to emerge from somewhere very deep in his soul. You taught me it's possible to be legendary and still be human. Curry felt his eyes well up. They weren't tears of sadness, but of that complex emotion that arises when someone you deeply admire chooses to show vulnerability before you. It was like receiving a gift you never knew you needed. Michael, Curry began to respond, but Jordan gently raised his hand, indicating there was still more. But what I really want to tell you is this, Jordan whispered, and now his voice carried an intensity that made the surrounding air seem electrically charged. Tyler Brooks, still monitoring everything, held his breath. Great things happen when nobody is watching, and the greatest of all was about to be revealed. Jordan leaned slightly toward Curry, his words now a whisper that would be captured by Camera 7 in crystal clarity that would change millions of lives. Watching you helped me find courage to reconnect with my own children. Seeing how you balance excellence and love made me realize I didn't need to choose between being a legend and being a present father. The impact of these words was immediate and overwhelming. Curry felt as if he had been hit by an 80-an emotional wave that started from his chest and spread throughout his body. How is it possible that some words have the power to rewrite how we see our own impact on the world? I called Marcus last week, Jordan continued, referring to his eldest son. For the first time in years, it wasn't about business or family obligations. It was just to say I missed him. And you know why? Jordan paused what seemed like an eternity. Because I saw you doing that naturally with Riley and Ryan, and I thought, if Steph can do it, maybe I can too. It was impossible not to perceive that something monumentally transformative was happening. Diana Thompson, event organizer who had coordinated hundreds of similar occasions, was passing through the corridor when she heard fragments of the conversation. She stopped instinctively, recognizing she was witnessing one of those moments that define lives. "Steph," Jordan whispered now with total vulnerability. "Without you knowing, you saved me from becoming a stranger in my own family. You showed me that true greatness isn't about dominating, it's about connecting." Curry could no longer contain his tears. They weren't tears of sadness, but of that deep emotion that arises when we realize our existence had an impact we never imagined. What would you feel if you discovered that simply by being yourself, you helped someone heal wounds from decades? I didn't know," Curry whispered back, his voice choked with emotion. "I was just trying to be the best I could be, as a father and as a player." "And that was exactly it," Jordan responded, and now a genuine smile, not the competitive smile the world knew, but a smile of pure gratitude, lit up his face. "You taught me we don't need to be perfect to be enough." Great things happen when nobody is watching, and at that moment, the greatest transformation of all was happening in the hearts of two men who discovered their journeys were more connected than they ever imagined. And it was then that the truth finally came to light. The hug that followed wasn't planned. It was instinctive, inevitable, like two river currents that finally meet after flowing through separate valleys for decades. Have you ever wondered what the sound of two souls healing at the same time is like? The hug that followed wasn't planned. It was instinctive, inevitable, like two river currents that finally meet after flowing through separate valleys for decades. At that moment, when Curry's tears met Jordan's genuine smile, something magical happened in the air. It wasn't magic in the supernatural sense, but that deeply human magic that arises when two people allow themselves to be completely authentic with each other. Tyler Brooks, still observing through the monitors, felt his own eyes well up. How is it possible that a moment between two people manages to touch the heart of someone who merely observes? "Thank you," Curry whispered in Jordan's ear during the hug. "Thank you for letting me be part of your healing journey." His words came loaded with humility that transcended any athletic achievement. You could feel that gratitude wasn't just about recognition. It was about purpose, about discovering that our existence can heal wounds we didn't even know existed. Jordan held the hug for a few more seconds, as if he wanted to absorb all the connection energy he had lost over the years. "No," he responded with a firm but gentle voice. "Thank you for showing me it's never too late to start over." Rachel Kim, official event photographer who had returned to retrieve forgotten equipment, caught the last moments of that encounter. Something that touches deeply is when we witness the exact instant someone chooses vulnerability over invulnerability. She instinctively lowered her camera. Some moments are too sacred to be captured. They exist only to be lived. Naturally, this leads us to the extraordinary consequences that followed. 3 days later, Marcus Jordan received a call that would change his perception of his father forever. It wasn't about business, sponsorships, or family responsibilities. It was Michael Jordan, simply as a father, saying, "Son, I'd like to know how your week was. Really. No rush, no agenda. I just want to listen." What impresses most is how small acts of courage create waves that spread far beyond what we imagine. Jasmine Jordan, Michael's daughter, also began receiving different calls. Conversations about dreams, fears, hopes. Conversations she had wanted to have with her father since adolescence, but never knew how to begin. Steph Curry, in turn, discovered something equally transformative. Nicole Martinez, assistant who had worked with the Curry family for years, noticed a subtle but profound change in how Steph talked about his own impact. "He was always an incredible father," she commented weeks later. But after that event, it's like he finally understood the power of his own authenticity. How many times in life do we discover that what we do naturally can be exactly what someone needs to heal? Curry began to share more openly his own vulnerabilities as a father, his doubts, his imperfections, not to diminish himself, but to show that greatness and humanity not only can coexist, they potentiate each other. 6 months later, something extraordinary happened. Jordan and Curry met again, this time at a Warriors game. But now there was no tension, no careful distance. Joshua Miller, veteran reporter who had covered the NBA for 20 years, observed something he had never seen before. Jordan talking with Curry as if they were old friends, exchanging stories about their children, laughing genuinely. The difference was palpable, Miller described later. It was as if two people had finally allowed their true personalities to appear. It was impossible not to notice that both carried a lightness that didn't exist before, as if they had deposited heavy burdens they had carried for decades. Great things happen when nobody is watching, and one of the greatest was happening silently in both their families. Marcus Jordan began bringing his own children to visit their grandfather with a frequency that hadn't happened in years. The children, who before saw Michael Jordan only as a distant legend, began to know him as Grandpa Mike, someone who asked questions about school, told funny stories, and, for the first time, was genuinely present. Emily Johnson, family therapist who worked discreetly with the Jordan family during this period, described the transformation as one of the most authentic healing processes she had ever witnessed. It wasn't about techniques or strategies, she explained. It was about a man who finally gave himself permission to be imperfect, and, paradoxically, that made him more complete. What would you feel if you discovered your personal growth journey inspired someone you admire to begin their own journey? Curry frequently reflected on this question. During an interview months later, when asked about moments that deeply marked him, he mentioned, "Sometimes we impact lives in ways we never imagined. This taught me to be even more intentional about the kind of person I choose to be, because we never know who's watching and needing inspiration." Jordan, in turn, became a silent advocate for present fatherhood in sports, not through speeches or public campaigns, but through actions. When young athletes sought his advice about their careers, he invariably included conversations about balancing success and family. "You can be legendary on the court and still be present at home," became his consistent message. Ashley Williams, podcast producer about fatherhood in sports, interviewed several athletes who had received this advice from Jordan. "It was surreal," one of them commented. "The guy who always represented total obsession with basketball was now teaching us about the importance of being present for our children. And it wasn't hypocritical. You could see he was living it." Naturally, this leads us to the true legacy of that moment, captured by Camera 7. It wasn't just about two basketball stars having an intimate conversation. It was about demonstrating that it's never too late to heal, to grow, to choose connection over protection, vulnerability over invulnerability. 1 year later, during another charity event, Jordan and Curry met again backstage. This time, there were no security cameras capturing the moment, no tension in the air. There were only two men who had found in mutual vulnerability a type of strength that competition could never provide. "How are things with Marcus?" Curry asked naturally, as old friends do. "Better than I ever imagined possible," Jordan responded with a smile that carried genuine gratitude. "And you? How's it going balancing everything?" "Every day is a learning experience," Curry laughed. "But now I know I don't need to have all the answers. I just need to be present." Great things happen when nobody is watching, but sometimes, when someone has the courage to make those things visible, they inspire transformations that echo far beyond the original moment. That whisper captured by a security camera became a reminder for millions of people that true greatness isn't about being perfect. It's about having the courage to be real. How is it possible that a simple conversation between two people manages to touch the hearts of so many others? Perhaps because deep down, we all struggle with the same fears. The fear of not being enough, the fear of having lost too much time, the fear that it's too late to change. And when we see someone like Michael Jordan, symbol of invincibility, choose vulnerability, it gives us permission to do the same. The truth that broke hearts wasn't a sad truth. It was a truth that broke closed hearts, that opened spaces for love to flow where before there was only distant admiration. It was proof that it's never too late to choose connection, never too late to grow, never too late to let our humanity be our greatest strength. And perhaps that's the most powerful lesson of all. That great things happen when nobody is watching. But the greatest happen when we finally have the courage to stop hiding our truth and allow others to see not just our greatness, but our humanity. Because it's at the intersection of these two things that true magic happens, not just in sports, but in life.